Hello, my beautiful friends, my fellow space blobs, sparkly blobs, burnt out, tired, sensitive visionaries, wherever you are in the journey. Welcome back to this space. I have a topic today as we move through this Gemini full moon energy, which is just so robust and present and a little bit wild, very free spirited, that I think is going to be really, really helpful for framing the way you're thinking about your next dreams and longings. We are continuing those themes as we move through the final segment of this Sagittarius season. And I want to dive right into it because here's the question. Have you ever noticed that, you'll be feeling that wave of longing, new ideas coming up, you feel ready, you can feel those visions coming, maybe you're feeling really in alignment with yourself, you're feeling like that new idea is really landing and you're feeling the excitement and you're really in flow with it. Maybe for a few days, every morning you wake up and you just feel connected to it and you can just feel that it's coming, or that, the ideas are flowing and suddenly you're writing notes and taking little steps and you just feel so good. And you're like, yes, I'm opening up my life and here we go. And then a few days into it or a week or two into it, you hit into this wall of feeling almost worse than you've ever felt before. Like you suddenly feel scared, stressed, overwhelmed. Maybe you get in a fight with a friend or a family member, or you start to feel like it was all just an illusion, or like you are just feeling really off. And it almost feels like you're further from your true self than you've ever been before. And it almost feels like, what is going on? Why, when I was just in such a visionary, clear-headed space, am I feeling really, really big contrast and stress? And I've realized that this is a very natural step in the process. As I was looking back at times when really big visions would land in my life and I would be feeling so excited about them, and I would really start to play with the ingredients and start thinking about how I wanted to put it all together, I would almost always, and this is still true to this day, have this experience of deep contrast where I felt really, really far from it, a little ways into that journey of having the visuals. And this can happen for a few reasons. One is that, we can really see what's not working in our lives anymore in our current state. So once we've kind of let ourselves see and feel a vision and a change, a shift, something that we know wants to come forth in us, suddenly we look around and the ingredients all feel a little bit off. That is really overwhelming for our systems at times and can feel a little bit disheartening as well, because we realize, oh my gosh, so much has to change. And that's another part of it. We're processing what it actually means to follow our calling. If we're really listening to it and we start letting it flow, it means that we're going to start having to think about the real world consequences that might come about from making those changes. That's also a lot to process. And I also think the final thing that comes up when we start to really let a vision land is that we face our fears. We face into the parts of ourselves that do not feel allowed to make this change, allowed to shift in this way, or like we're valuable enough to follow those dreams. And here's the thing. I've realized that it's really wise to enjoy the big visioning, enjoy the playful creativity, enjoy letting ourselves float into all those beautiful things, and to prepare ourselves for these big moments of contrast and discomfort that come after big downloads, big waves of realization, because they are really innate to the process. And the thing is that initially it feels like maybe we're just moving further from what we really want to do, and maybe we're failing to really see. I see it the exact opposite. I see this step in connecting with what we want next as really, really valuable and an important part of the process. And when we allow for that to be there as one of the steps in our journey, it makes visioning and wild dreaming much more possible, sustainable, and it relieves us from some of the unnecessary guilt or judgment we might feel when we inevitably hit into this space. And that's what this full moon is all about. So let's talk through the specifics of this Gemini full moon and what's coming up for me here and why it connects to what I've just been talking about. If you are new here, I am so happy to have you in this space. It is such a gift to get to share this space with you. If you've stuck around with me for a little while, you are used to my tangents and the way I put ideas together, and I'm so happy you are back here. I would love it if you stuck around. You can also find so many more supportive resources on my Patreon, and I'd love to see you in that space as well. But let's dive right into this Gemini full moon. This full moon in Gemini is really helping us to take a look around, a moment of illumination to really notice who we are right now. This is the first full moon we've had since the big shift of Pluto into Aquarius. It's our final full moon of 2024. It's the final full moon before the solstice and the beginning of Capricorn season. So it holds a really beautiful place of illumination. And as it works with the Sagittarius Gemini axis, which is so imaginative, it plays with our belief systems and the way we think and storytell, the way we write story about ourselves, the way we daydream and imagine the world and how that affects the way we live. This full moon really helps us to do that. And I think it's important that this full moon also is not about who we've been the past 16 years, the last 6 months, but who we are right now. It's also not a full moon that's trying to highlight anxieties about the future. However, this full moon wants us to get really honest with what we want, like honest, true visioning and dreaming, which I think can sometimes be a little bit intimidating because there's kind of the light-hearted version of dreaming where we might think about, something we want to do on an afternoon, maybe some more generalized things about what we want to feel, like peace and joy, which is great. We want that. We want that mellower dreaming and visioning. It's very, very important. But this full moon is a little bit more illuminating what we're really longing for, what we can't ignore, what we need to really pay attention to. So because it's a full moon, it's going to be illuminating what can no longer be held in the same place. Now, this full moon is also really interesting because it doesn't have a lot of conversations going on. It's not being squared by anything. It's not being trined by anything. The only thing that's going on is a little semi-sextile with Uranus over in the neighboring sign of Taurus, just nudging us toward change a little bit. So there's this really deep clarity going on with this full moon where it is just inviting us to really, truly get honest with ourselves. This full moon is also happening at the same time that Mercury is stationing direct in Sagittarius, and as we are getting used to what Mars retrograde is starting to illuminate for many of us. So themes around burnout, exhaustion, change in motivation, questioning where we want to put our energy are coming up right now with Mars retrograde going on in Leo, in fellow fire sign Leo, with the Mercury in Sagittarius energy. Those two are trining at the same time as this full moon. So there's really, really clear insight here about what's working, what's not, what feels natural and easy, and what is just no longer connecting. But this brings me back to the point I was making in the opening of this conversation today, which was about this idea that a lot of times when we start to truly vision, we start to feel that flow of ideas, everything's moving. I feel so excited, I can see it, I can feel it. And then we hit that discomfort and we feel like we are further from our dreams than ever. I think this moon kind of brings up both elements. It brings up the really, really honest dreaming as well as some emotions underneath this. And I think this is so interesting and fascinating and something I've been exploring in my own kind of process of connecting with how I'm dreaming about this coming year and what really matters to me and where I can use my energy, which is just that it's kind of that idea of what Carl Jung said, which is that one of the journeys in life we take is to become who we are afraid to become who we are afraid to be, based on, the rules of society where we try to keep ourselves safe and what's really longing to be transmuted and expressed. So the other side of this full moon, and Gemini, it always has a duality to it, right, is about recognizing any fear or shame that might be coinciding with the dreaming that is also coming up. That's kind of a complicated assignment to explore these two parts of ourselves at the same time. But I think it's really fascinating. Often when I notice what I'm most afraid of when it comes to my changing self, it's completely connected to what I'm longing for the most. And they are often right there, tandem, side by side. In fact, that is what we're going to be doing over on my Patreon for the ritual, the practice for this full moon. I'm going to walk us through an entire visioning process that allows us to work with these two aspects because they really work so well together. And once we start to recognize what we kind of fear, what we are nervous about changing in ourselves, a lot of times we're going to get a lot clearer on what we're truly visioning in to the new year. And what I've come to realize is when I hit those days of deep contrast, when I hit those moments of big resistance, when I hit those moments where I feel like I'm further than ever from the dream life I have, I've actually hit right into that vein of gold within myself. Because now I know that I'm getting to the part of the story that is important to me, that wants to be expressed and transmuted. And I think that's what's so fascinating about the energy of this very crystalline, clear, communicative full moon. I find that the moons in Gemini and Sagittarius will often give me feedback that is so clear, a little bit sassy, a little bit like, come on now, you know that you can't just keep doing the same thing for the next 20 years. Like, you know that it's time for something a little bit different. So let's look into it and let's face it and let's feel it and let's move toward it. And I think there's a really deep hopefulness in this full moon. I know the world is very complicated right now. And it can feel a little bit absurd to be focusing on what we're dreaming of, but I think this is a really important time to let that lead us right now and feel into it. I'm starting to shuffle here for our little intuitive check-in, and I was just curious, are any of you noticing that you're having really distinct longings and dreams come up that are really, really hard to ignore at this point? So it's just kind of like it just keeps coming up, and so you're having to process a lot of emotions around realizing how you're going to need to change and pursuing that. I'm feeling that so much. My body's been giving me tons of physical feedback about needing to take a moment and feel and not force certain things to come through and not force myself to produce a certain amount or show up in certain ways. Two cards wanted to come out. They're so perfect. The World and the Empress. I couldn't ask for two better major arcana cards. I'm just going to round that out with a third card, I think. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting moment, this full moon, and Four of Swords. I love that integration, the importance of allowing the realization around our dreaming, changing selves to fully land and just not feel like we have to be in a rush, even if we are feeling complex emotions about that changing self. Four of Swords is a really great place of integration. But let's talk about this because the world is really an important energy right now, I think, in general. I think a lot of us are feeling it naturally and innately, and just the process and where the world is right now in that process. It all feels very strange at this time. There's a lot of different energy frequencies moving around, and you might one day tap into like the hope of beauty and new beginnings, and another day tap into despair and loss. And the World is the final major arcana card. It holds that place of beginning and end. And you'll notice that with the World, there's this kind of egg-shaped wreath, which is a symbol of the creative void and the mystery within it, and also the joy that's waiting within it. A lot of times when I see this card, I think about, smile and the void smiles back. That's kind of a meditation concept. It's like as you meditate on the wild magic of the universe and you start to practice it with kindness towards yourself, you feel the warmth and kindness reflected back at you. And there's this longing to help each of us bring our gifts forth into the world, bring our visions forth into the world, care for each other, and allow that to be a beautiful thing. And I think at its core, this is a card of optimism and hope, and that it's really important we hold the energy for what we want to bring into the world. I know so many of us here are really sensitive, and we have gifts, and we also have challenges of moving through this world. and maybe don't always work in the same function as all the systems that be. But I think this is a really important card of reminding us that our dreaming right now is very, very important and powerful, and that what we think of as maybe not that important or not that essential maybe won't change the world, won't fix war, won't fix power structures that are really upsetting. I still think there's something really important to pay attention to right now. And that's where the Empress comes in too. You know, what's so interesting to me about this reading is that both the World and the Empress are very joyful creativity cards. They are archetypes that are very much about what is easy and joyful and beautiful to create. The Empress is tied to Venus, to this idea of receptivity. And the World is both the receptivity and the external expression. It kind of melds both together. But I think what's so fascinating is they both say, what feels natural to you? What feels true to who you are now in this version of the world, in this version of who you are? Not who you think you need to be, not when you're keeping score of how you've done over the last year and what that looks like, but when you are just here with yourself right now. What feels easy, what feels beautiful, what feels great. And I think it's really interesting that it's followed by the Four of Swords because, like I mentioned at the beginning, one thing about manifestation culture and manifestation videos, they're great. I actually don't have a problem with it at all. I think it's really great to have the skill of learning how to hear ourselves and really know ourselves and understand how to hear our longings. However, I do think that often in the discussions around manifesting and vision boarding, they do skip over there is an emotional process, a hidden emotional process that goes on when we start to really connect to our longings, and it can be a little uncomfortable at times. It can make us feel a little overwhelmed. And I think the Four of Swords is reminding us to integrate any wisdom we receive, because these are big energies coming through here for this Gemini full moon, really big, clear, strong messages. We need a moment to integrate that. So I think this final card here is just a reminder. Fours in tarot are all about a moment of culmination, a pause before we continue on our journey. I think it's important that we take the few days after this full moon to allow things to land, allow things to settle, and not feel like we have to rush just because we got a clear message. Because once again, the World and the Empress want these processes, anything that's calling to us, to feel natural, to feel easy, to feel in flow, not to feel like we are forcing ourselves forward. All three of these cards are a reminder that force right now is not going to work very well, especially with Mars retrograde. Like, forcing ourselves through is just not going to be an option as we move through this gateway into a new calendar year. It's just not how the most powerful things happen right now. It's going to happen through receptivity, through ease, through kindness, through softness. And that is even in the face of some of the more complex, messy things going on in the world. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be walking us through a little vision boarding practice that honestly incorporates that emotional, interesting process that percolates and helping us to get really clear on what it is we're truly wanting to envision into our lives. It's going to be such a good practice. I'm really looking forward to it. And that actually leads me into my Wild Dreaming New Year series that we are also going to be doing for 4 weeks, for the 2 weeks before New Year's and the 2 weeks after. I'm going to be releasing one ritual each week in a little session that you can do. These are about nonlinear thinking, about surrealist art, about playing with the way we think about visioning and vision boarding. And it really, for me, these are practices I've made for myself that I wanted to share with my close circle, my close community over on Patreon, because they help me not get into the mindset of New Year's manifestation and keep me in my magic. And I think many of the people that are connected with me here also have a similar type of magic and energy that isn't really about kind of external goals and like getting what we want and leaving legacies and dominating the world, but is about a much subtler magic in the universe. So if you are looking to hang out with me and just get that support and get that visioning and be a part of a community that gets to share in that together, I highly, highly recommend coming join me on Patreon. I try to make it so affordable so that everybody can join me that can. I hope to see you over there, and I hope to see you here because we have so many more things coming up. We are going to continue talking about Mars retrograde, Capricorn season. The nodes of the moon are coming up on a shift in January, so we are going to talk about that very soon. There's so much coming up in the next few months, so I really hope to see you here so that I can offer you that support. I'm sending you all so much love. Let me know, how is your energy feeling? Are you like me where I cannot force work out? I have to just rest between everything, and it's been a really big season of reflection for me, and my energy is just not letting me ignore the signals. So I'd be curious if you have a thought on that. Leave your comment below. I love to read your thoughts and experiences. I'll see you all back here so very, very soon, and sending you so much love, my friends and sparkly space blobs.